Hello, and welcome to Chapel FM Arts Centre. We're up in Studio 3. Some fantastic stuff happening this evening. Last night we had a full house for the launch of our anthology, which I'm going to plug shamelessly now, because there are a few contributors here in the audience. It's an anthology of writing on the theme of missing, and it's rather lovely. We're very proud of it. It's the first ever published anthology that we've ever done at Chapel FM. So you can buy a copy for £5, if you like, downstairs. We've got a sort of double bill of storytelling now, which is very exciting. It's lovely to have two stories in a row. We've got Sonia Miller in a minute and then Vicky Orton a bit later on. And later on this evening, we've got the wonderful performance ensemble doing their piece, Missing You in 20 Minutes. So without any more from me, Sonia Miller.
Whispers of the past. From the tower, they could see their father's land stretch for miles and miles beyond the brook, beyond the forest where they had spent so many happy days as children, days of long, warm, fun-filled summers. Richard was disappointed that his brother and sister had decided against travelling with their papa to London, as he wanted to be alone to contemplate how best to break the news. He secretly smiled at his younger sister's pretty, appealing face and delightfully playful way in which she teased their younger brother. Being the middle child and the only girl, she had a special magical way of beguiling not only her two brothers, but anyone who ventured into their world, their precious world, a world of secrets and adventure. His distant thoughts had not escaped his younger siblings' notice. Yet, try as she may, his unwillingness to share what would result in the major disruption of their world persuaded her to accept his affirmed silence and brooding. She therefore put her futile attempts behind her, continuing to pervade the brightly filled space with her infectious laughter and somewhat inane chatter. Richard leant on the cold stone ledge, pondering the previous day when he had first encountered her. The tall, beautiful woman who had appeared from nowhere. This woman knew his name and that of Olivia and Henry. They had never known their mother. Papa had never spoken about her, except to say how alike she and Olivia were. And now she was here. Dappled sunshine danced through the leaves onto the hard hoof-marked bridle path leading through the woods to the stone wall, the familiar boundary that determined their father's land from that of Squire Finlay. Olivia knew that she must never cross over into this no man's land. The squire's dogs were fierce and menacing when it came to trespassers. Olivia never could understand why anyone would keep such dislikable and daunting animals. But Squire Finlay was not just anyone. He was the local magistrate, the important man who upheld law and order in the village and surrounding hamlets. And not everyone agreed with his ways or his points of view. But he was a kind man, firm but fair, generally well thought of by all who came into contact with him. Squire Finlay had a daughter the same age as Olivia. The two girls would often chat, laugh, and dance together. And on this day, Olivia needed no encouragement from her friend to run barefoot through the woods, something that Papa and Richard would certainly not approve of. That she may step on something unyielding was farthest from her mind as she felt the warm summer wind rush through her long mane of chestnut hair. The woman watched her and smiled inwardly. Henry was only 2 years old when his mother disappeared. He was a timid, quiet boy, but what he lacked in confidence, he more than compensated for in his academic abilities. By the time he was 5, Henry could recite all his times tables and was thoroughly adept at reading his siblings' books. In addition to his scholastic achievements, Henry had a unique, sophisticated aptitude for drawing. His sketches were highly creative and detailed. All year round, even when the crisp, glistening snow of winter covered the grounds, he would spend hours sitting in the gardens or the woods with his sketchbooks and pencils. And this is where, on the same day as watching Olivia run barefoot through the woods, she observed Henry from afar. Catherine had never meant to speak to any of the children. She was merely curious to see them, to know that they were healthy and happy. Hurtful and difficult though it may be, she realized that she had no right whatsoever to intrude into their lives. She had been absent for 10 years. Why would their mother simply disappear from their young lives? Would they forgive her? Would they believe her? So many questions would be asked. When Richard came across her accidentally whilst walking in the woods, she froze. And when she tried to move away, she realized immediately that her son, this strikingly handsome young man, knew exactly who she was. And it was at that point that they were both aware that their lives were about to change. I need to talk to you, both of you. Olivia and Henry looked up from their place of repose, each detecting a note of anxiousness in Richard's normally calm, soothing voice. "What's the matter with you today?" asked Henry. "Yes," said Olivia. "Why the long, sullen face? What's wrong?" Richard closed the door of the salon, ensuring first that nobody was around to eavesdrop on what he had to say. He then walked to one of the 2 tall leaded windows and stood staring onto the luscious lawns leading to the familiar woods at the front of the house. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and turned to face his younger sister and brother. They were looking at him in such earnest that he almost couldn't find the words that would be anything less than daunting, even distressing for them. Clearing his throat, he began to speak. "We had an aunt," Olivia gasped before saying, "Has Aunt Alice died? What happened to her? She was only here last month. What happened?" Richard put both hands up to appease her. "No, as far as I'm aware, Aunt Alice is absolutely fine." "But Father doesn't have any other sisters, so I don't understand," continued Olivia, rising from her place on the settee, moving swiftly towards her brother. Richard stepped forward, placing his hands on her shoulders. He guided her back to her place beside Henry. Taking another deep breath, he looked down, then at his siblings. "Our mother had a younger sister." There was silence as Olivia and Henry stared at him, and then at each other. They never ever mentioned their mother. They each had a sense that something sinister may have befallen her. Although Olivia especially wanted to know about her, she knew better than to ask their papa anything regarding the woman who had disappeared all those years ago when they were such young children. "How do you know this?" asked Henry quietly. He had remained silent throughout this exchange. Richard and Olivia turned to look at him. This boy, this young, handsome brother who rarely spoke about anything other than the books he was reading, or the birds he had observed in the grounds of the woods, or the fish he had caught in the little babbling brook that ran trippingly over stones they had skimmed so many times. Olivia returned her gaze towards Richard. "Yes, how do you know this?" she asked. Once again, Richard breathed deeply before continuing. "How I know this, I will tell you at length," he said, looking from one to the other. "But first I must relay her story." He walked again to the tall, elegant window. He felt more self-assured, facing away from them in order to secure some degree of confidence in what he was about to say. "When our aunt, our mother's sister, was 17 years old, she met and fell in love with a man much older than herself. She disgraced our family by running away with him. They apparently went over to Ireland. It all happened so suddenly. Our mother begged Papa to go after her, to try and find her sister and bring her home." He then hesitated. "Well, go on," said Olivia. "What happened? Did he find her?" Richard recollected the previous day when he had encountered their mother in the woods. The few memories he had of her were those of happiness, amusement, and much love. Every day when Olivia and Henry were in the nursery, she would spend time with him. She taught him reading skills and how to recite his times tables. He learned so much from her about history and nature. She taught him how to speak French. But his favorite lessons were in Papa's study, where she showed him all the faraway, colorful countries on the giant globe that sat pride of place on the small table at the window overlooking the kitchen garden. He would gaze in awe and wonderment as she regaled him with exciting stories of explorers and pirates on the high seas, of rich, vibrant, colorful markets and merchants in Europe, stories of traveling theater groups and exotic animals. Even at the tender age of 6, he vowed to himself that one day he would travel and explore all the places his mother talked about with such vivacity and excitement. But then she had disappeared from his world, from their world. His rumination was interrupted by his sister's voice. "Richard, did he find our mother's sister?" asked Olivia. Her elder brother turned round once again to face them, placing his hands in his pockets before continuing. "No. After searching for her for a whole month, he returned without her. So, against Papa's wishes, our mother decided to try herself. She set off for Ireland, fully aware that as Papa had failed, then her chances of actually finding her were slim, if not impossible. And on that faithful journey, something happened that stole her away from us, from Papa. On the boat over to Ireland, there was a violent storm. It raged for hours, and the next thing she knew was that she had awoken in unfamiliar surroundings." Olivia once again tried to interject, but Richard discouraged her by continuing the story he had been told. "Our mother could remember nothing of what happened, nothing about the boat, nor the storm. She could not remember who she was, or that she had gone to seek out her sister. She did not remember us." "But how do you know all of this?" demanded Olivia. Richard hesitated, closed his eyes, and then said very softly and calmly, "Because she told me." He then waited for a response from Olivia and Henry, but their only reaction was to stare at him in total disbelief. Henry held his sister's hand and said, "We never keep secrets from each other. When did she tell you? When did you see her?" Richard smiled, appearing somewhat nervous. "It is precisely that we never keep secrets from one another that I am telling you all of this now. Please, just let me finish. Then you can ask questions." He continued, "Our mother was fortunate in that she had survived the storm, but apparently she somehow was missed on the Irish coast. Nobody found her." Richard hesitated, looking at their earnest, innocent faces. He contemplated whether or not to break the news to his siblings that their mother had been found wandering like a pauper on the streets of Dublin, begging for food and shelter by a gentleman who had questioned her softly spoken English accent. Richard decided that this was something they needn't hear, not yet anyway. Somehow or other, our mother ended up at the house of a Lady Sherbrooke in Rathcoole. I'm not sure how this happened. All I know is what she told me, that she was ill for a very long time, and that Lady Sherbrooke tried to find out where she was from. But because our mother could remember nothing at all, not even anything about the shipwreck, and there were no clues as to who she was, they found no trace of her origins anywhere." "So you're saying all this time that she never remembered anything of her past?" Olivia interjected. "Surely they consulted doctors, read newspapers, contacted the police. They knew from whence the boat had sailed, so Papa would have been told that she'd been found alive." "Olivia, Lady Sherbrooke nor her son who had rescued our mother knew that she had been a passenger on that ill-fated boat. And everybody here, including Papa, must have assumed that our mother had drowned on that faithful journey." Olivia stared at him, desperately trying to comprehend the words her brother was saying. It just didn't make any sense to her. Her doubtful, disbelieving expression did not go unnoticed by Richard. "But why did Papa never tell us this?" said Henry quietly. "That she had drowned. Why never speak about her?" This was indeed an extremely pertinent question. Why had their father not just told them that she had drowned? Why did he choose never to discuss her at all? Richard looked from one to the other. He then looked down and sighed. He knew now that he should have informed Papa first. Papa would have known what to do and what to say. "I don't know," is all he said. Perhaps he didn't talk about her because he was so ashamed regarding the reason she had left in the first place. Each of the Harrison children then were quiet and still for quite some time. It was Olivia who broke the silence. How did she remember who she was? Richard stared at her before commencing what appeared to him to be the most absurd part of his mother's story. He was weary now, and he just desired the entire occurrence and inquisition to end. He sat down opposite Olivia and Henry, once again breathed deeply, and relayed what their mother had said to him the previous day. When she had recovered physically, she apparently accompanied Lady Sherbrooke on many trips abroad as her companion. They travelled all over the world, spent several months of each year out of Ireland. As time went by, she began to recollect moments and things from her past, like pieces of music and particular books. Every time they visited France, her ability to speak the language improved swiftly. This was apparently all very gradual over many months and years. He stopped. "So what caused her to remember us?" asked Olivia. Richard stood up. He walked across the room and he opened the door into their papa's study. He returned with the globe. His sister and brother stared at him inquisitively as he placed the apparent catalyst of their mother's memory slowly and carefully on the small table in front of the fireplace. He then turned and stood, hands in pockets, staring at his siblings. "Well, go on," said Olivia impatiently. "What has the globe to do with any of this?" So Richard told them about his lessons with their mother all those years ago in their papa's study. Olivia suddenly remembered that he'd once told her about these times, but that she had cried, and he never again mentioned it. He continued with his mother's story. "When they were in Ireland and not travelling, our mother was governess to Lady Sherbrooke's 2 granddaughters, aged 9 and 7. A couple of months ago, the children were given a globe identical to this one of Papa's." "So that's when she remembered about your lessons," said Olivia. She stood up, walked to her elder brother, smiled at him, then took both of his hands. "What else did she tell you?" she asked. "She didn't really tell me anymore. At that point, the door opened and their father walked into the room. None of them had heard him coming up the stony path, so he must have gone round the side and in through the stable block. He looked tired and drawn. Olivia ran to him, threw her arms around him and said very gently, "In the woods. That's why you have been so out of sorts. You saw her yesterday and you didn't think to let us know." "I'm telling you now," responded Richard. "I needed time to think, Henry." He looked over at his father, imploring him to speak. How long had he known that their mother was alive? Why had he not told them? Their father led the sobbing Olivia by the hand to the settee where he sat cradling her in his arms. He then beckoned his sons to sit down. "We will find out in due course exactly what happened. There are many questions to be asked. So much time has been lost, so much water passed under the bridge, and we can't turn back the clock. We have to adapt to a life and a future in the knowledge that your mama is alive and well." For several minutes there was a stillness, interrupted only by Olivia's quiet sobs. Then Henry said, "Where is she now?" They all looked at him. "Where is our mother now?" Their gaze turned to their father. She's staying with Lady Sherbrooke in London. There was another long pause before Henry said, "How long have you known, Papa?" Their father looked into his son's innocent, confused eyes. "For only 2 days. Had you accompanied me to London yesterday, I was going to leave you with your Aunt Alice whilst I met with your mother. Well, that would have been very difficult because she was here." Henry could not believe nor comprehend what was happening, nor would he until he could see for himself the mother who had left when he was no more than 2 years old. "Henry, this isn't Papa's fault." Richard could see quite clearly that Henry, the most sensitive of the three, was hurt and troubled. He could see the tears welling in his eyes as Henry stood, then walked swiftly out of the room. Richard started to follow him when his father said, "Leave him be a while, Richard. There's nothing you can say or do at this stage that is going to make him understand or feel any better." The constant ticking of the salon clock was almost soothing against the deafening silence in the room. Nobody spoke nor looked at each other. Olivia's sobbing had subsided. She was lying against her father, her eyes closed. After what seemed like hours, Richard spoke. He had gauged the timing and had thought very carefully before saying, "Papa, what are we to do now?" His father's sad, drawn face looked up, taking in the depth of concern reflected in his eldest child's face. He knew he could not bring Catherine home until his children had grown accustomed to her existence, until the news of her return had finally registered properly with them all. What were they thinking? Did they want to meet her? Did they want her here at all? Several days passed. There was a lull in the house. No laughter and teasing, no sibling arguments, no toing and froing or frantic opening and closing of doors. But there was discussion. All three children were curious about their mother, even though their papa could only speak of her from their time together before she had disappeared. As each day passed, their father began to look less strained. He delighted in speaking about Catherine, and his children listened as he captivated them about her quick-wittedness, her intellect and her talents, her kindness, and of course, her beauty. Even Henry listened intently, wanting to know more about this woman he could not visualize or remember. They proceeded to ask more and more questions, listening in earnest to the candid responses. Although he had not indicated as such, Richard, Olivia, and Henry were all fully aware that when their beloved papa left for London the following day, that he would return with their mamma, Catherine Harrison.